The Men's Book Club Playbook, a practical guide to starting a reading group. Guys actually attend. Copyright 2026 by Dave Brown. Introduction. This is not a literary salon. When most men hear the phrase book club, a specific image comes to mind. They picture velvet chairs, carefully curated wine selections, and conversations dominated by literary jargon. They imagine an environment where the primary goal is to sound intelligent rather than to connect with the people in the room. This perception is unfortunate because a well-run men's book club requires none of those things. In truth, a successful reading group requires only 4 elements: a regular time, a decent book, a reason to show up, and enough structure to ensure the evening does not devolve into 6 guys eating nachos and arguing about municipal zoning. That final element, structure, matters far more than most people realize. Most men do not need another vague invitation to hang out sometime. Vague invitations rarely materialize into actual plans, and when they do, they often lack the momentum required to become a habit. What men need is a recurring container. They need a specific, repeatable reason to gather that can survive the inevitable chaos of adult life. A monthly book club serves this purpose perfectly because the book performs the awkward social labor on behalf of the group. Nobody is required to open the evening with deep, probing questions about the state of their soul. Instead, you can start by discussing a chapter about a 19th century shipwreck. Somehow, 20 minutes later, the conversation naturally shifts. Before you know it, people are talking about work, marriage, fathers, failure, risk, health, and ambition. The book simply opens the door. This guide is written for normal men who want to start or improve a book club without turning it into homework, therapy, or a fake intellectual pageant. The principles outlined in these pages are based on a simple premise. You do not need everyone to be a reader. You do not need everyone to finish every book, and you do not need perfect discussion questions. What you need is a repeatable system. That is exactly what this playbook provides. It is worth noting what this book is not. It is not merely a reading list disguised as a guide. It is not a lecture about the importance of classical literature. And it is not written for men who already have a thriving book club and simply want to optimize their hosting skills. It is written for the man who has thought, more than once, that he should read more and see his friends more, but who has done neither because he lacked a clear set of instructions. Those instructions are now in your hands. If you are starting a group from scratch, I recommend working through the chapters in order. Each concept builds upon the previous one. Once your club is established, you can treat this book as a reference manual, a tool to return to when attendance dips, the reading selections feel stale, or a specific problem arises within the group dynamic. Start small. Start soon. The first meeting is an experiment. The second meeting is when the club becomes real. Chapter 1. Why Men Need a Book Club. There is a secret at the heart of every successful men's book club. It is not actually about the books. The books are simply the excuse. The real product being created, month after month, is recurring friendship. Modern adult life is a scheduling swamp. As men age, their responsibilities expand. Careers demand more evenings and weekends. Children arrive, bringing with them a relentless calendar of practices, recitals, and bedtimes. Physical energy wanes. As a result, the friendships that once happened automatically, through school, sports teams, roommates, or early career proximity, begin to require deliberate, often exhausting maintenance. A book club solves a problem that most men feel acutely but do not know how to name. We need a reason to gather that is specific enough to schedule, yet flexible enough to survive the friction of daily life. The phrase, "let's hang out sometime," is not a plan. It is a wish thrown into the wind. Conversely, first Thursday of every month, 8 p.m., my house, we're discussing endurance and I'm making burgers, is a concrete plan. The book gives the group a shared object of focus. The meeting gives the friendship a recurring appointment. The discussion gives men permission to talk about something more compelling than work, the weather, or the optimal age at which to start caring about cholesterol. When properly structured, a good men's book club reliably produces 3 vital outcomes. 1. A low-pressure social ritual. In many social settings, men feel a subtle pressure to perform. They feel the need to appear successful, to be the smartest person in the room, or, in some modern circles, to perform vulnerability on command. A book club removes this pressure. The book allows the group to sneak up on real conversation sideways. A question like, "Would you have made the same decision as the protagonist?" can seamlessly transition into a conversation about personal courage. A question like, "Which character annoyed you the most?" can evolve into a discussion about ego and blind spots. A question like, "Did this book make you want to change anything about your routine?" can open the floor to honest talk about health, money, marriage, faith, or career regret. Side doors are highly underrated. They allow men to access depth without the awkwardness of a frontal assault. 2. A reason to read. Many men like the idea of reading more. Fewer men actually read more, primarily because read more is a vague intention, not a system. A monthly book club transforms reading from a solitary wish into a structured habit. It provides a deadline, a clear reward, and a mild dose of social pressure. This is not shame-based pressure, but rather just enough accountability to keep a book from becoming an expensive coaster on your nightstand. Furthermore, the group dynamic creates a powerful engine for discovery. Left to their own devices, most men will continue reading the same 3 categories forever: World War II history, business strategy, and biographies of relentless individuals who slept 4 hours a night. A club forces you to broaden your shelf. 3. A better conversation engine. Most adult conversation tends to pool at one of 2 extremes. It is either entirely superficial or intensely serious. A book club occupies the highly useful middle ground. You can explore the concept of risk through a survival narrative. You can examine ambition through a business biography. You can dissect fatherhood through a novel, or mortality through a book on longevity. Nobody has to announce, "Tonight we are going to discuss our deepest fears." The book places the topic on the table, and the men in the room decide how far they want to take it. The ultimate goal is not to finish every single page of every single book. The goal is not to produce academic literary criticism. The goal is to build a durable, monthly ritual where men read better books, engage in better conversations, and most importantly, keep showing up. That is the entire machine. Chapter 2. Pick the right kind of men's book club. Before you select a single book, you must choose the kind of group you are trying to build. Most book clubs fail because the founder skips this crucial step. They invite 8 people, choose a popular book, and simply assume the culture of the group will assemble itself organically. It will not. Without a clear blueprint, the group will lack direction, expectations will clash, and the momentum will inevitably stall. There are 3 proven models for a men's book club. Choosing the right one from the beginning will save you months of frustration. Model 1. The Burger and Book Club. This is the most accessible version of a book club and the easiest to start. In this model, the food and the social environment come first. The book comes second, and unstructured social time is intentionally built into the evening. This format is ideal for neighbors, church groups, groups of fathers, old friends, and men who would not necessarily describe themselves as readers. The tone is relaxed, funny, and forgiving. The best reading selections for this group are short novels, narrative nonfiction, survival stories, memoirs, and history books that read with the pacing of a thriller. The burger and book model works exceptionally well because the presence of food lowers the emotional temperature of the room. A man who feels sheepish about only reading 3 chapters can still show up, eat a burger, listen to the discussion, and feel motivated to read the next selection. The primary danger of this model is drift. Without a firm structure, the gathering quickly devolves into a dinner party where a book happens to be sitting on the table. The solution is simple. Put the book discussion firmly on the schedule. Social time is highly encouraged, but the book must receive its dedicated hour. Model 2. The Nonfiction Field Manual Club. This model is designed for men who want their reading to feel immediately useful. It is best suited for entrepreneurs, professionals, men focused on self-improvement, and those deeply interested in health, finance, leadership, or productivity. These are the men who instinctively ask, "What do we actually do with this information?" The tone of this group is practical, curious, and application-focused. Arguments are welcomed, provided they are constructive. The best books for this model cover longevity, business biographies, personal finance, psychology, and skill building. The strength of the Field Manual Club is its obvious value proposition. Men will prioritize attendance if they believe the discussion will tangibly improve their lives or careers. The danger, however, is that the group can easily turn into a live podcast discussion accompanied by snacks. Everyone extracts their intellectual takeaways, but nobody connects the material to their actual lives. The solution is to mandate one personal question at every meeting. Where does this concept show up in your own life? That single question forces the group to move from abstract information to concrete reality. Model 3. The Story First Men's Club. This club focuses on fiction and narrative nonfiction, with selections chosen specifically for their ability to generate robust discussion rather than mere entertainment. This model is best for men who already have an established reading habit, groups with diverse tastes, men who are fatigued by business books, and groups willing to debate character, meaning, and moral choices. The tone is reflective, lively, and occasionally rowdy. It should feel less like a high school book report and more like a jury deliberating around a campfire. The best books include adventure stories, war novels, crime narratives, literary fiction with strong plots, and stories centered on loyalty, betrayal, courage, failure, and death. The profound strength of this model is its depth. Well-told stories bypass our usual intellectual defenses. The danger is that some pragmatic men may view fiction as less useful than nonfiction. While they are mistaken, correcting them directly is poor hosting. The solution is to select fiction with high, obvious stakes. You do not need to convince anyone to care about symbolism if the narrative centers on a mutiny, a doomed expedition, or a man making terrible choices with absolute confidence. Choose your model. Do not overcomplicate this decision. Simply finish this sentence. Our group is for men who want to. For example, you might decide, our group is for men who want to read more and share a good monthly dinner. Alternatively, you might conclude, our group is for men who want to read gripping books and debate the moral choices the characters make. Once the purpose is clear, every subsequent decision becomes significantly easier. The purpose dictates who you should invite, what books you should select, and how you should structure the meeting. A vague club inevitably produces a vague evening. A clearly defined club becomes a lasting tradition. Chapter 3. The first 5 men matter most. When starting a book club, the instinct is often to invite as many people as possible, assuming that a larger roster will protect against absences. This is a mistake. Do not start with 20 people. 20 people is not a book club. It is a town hall meeting with hummus. You should start with 5 to 8 men. That specific number is small enough to require real conversation and large enough to survive the inevitable schedule conflicts. With fewer than 5 men, every cancellation feels like structural damage. If one person drops out, the entire enterprise feels fragile. With more than 10 men, the quieter individuals disappear into the upholstery, and the louder individuals begin to perform rather than converse. The sweet spot is 6 to 8, enough voices to create genuine variety, yet small enough that everyone feels accountable to the group. Your first 5 men will dictate the culture of the club. The books will not create the culture. The meeting format will not create the culture. The men will. Therefore, you must choose carefully. Why the founding members are everything. Consider the reality of the first few meetings. They are not actually about the books. They are about establishing the behavioral norms of the room. Is this an environment where men can disagree without the argument becoming personal? Is it a space where the quietest guy is given the floor? Is it a room where someone can admit, I didn't understand this chapter, without the person who selected the book sulking for the rest of the evening? The answers to those questions are determined entirely by the people in the room, not by the text on the page. A masterpiece of literature discussed by the wrong group of men will produce a terrible meeting. A mediocre book discussed by the right group of men can yield a 2-hour conversation that leaves everyone feeling slightly changed. This is why the founding membership decision requires deliberate thought. Invite for reliability, not literary status. When drafting a list of potential members, founders often look for the men who read the most. This is a miscalculation. The best book club member is not necessarily the guy with the most impressive library. The best member is the guy who reliably shows up. Reliability is the single most undervalued trait in a founding member. A man who reads every assigned book, attends every month, and contributes honestly is worth 3 men who read voraciously but cancel at the last minute, dominate the conversation when they do appear, or treat the meeting as optional whenever a better offer arises. You should seek out men who are curious, dependable, capable of listening, willing to read at least a portion of the book, socially generous, and able to handle disagreement without turning the living room into a courtroom. Curiosity matters far more than expertise. You do not need a room full of well-read scholars. You need a room full of men who are genuinely interested in ideas, in the perspectives of others, and in grappling with uncomfortable questions. The man who has read 50 books this year but cannot stop correcting everyone else's interpretations is far less valuable to the group than the man who has read 5 books but asks the exact question that makes the entire room pause and think. Furthermore, listening is a distinct skill, and not everyone possesses it. Before you extend an invitation, reflect on the last meaningful conversation you had with that individual. Did he ask you questions? Did he allow you to finish your sentences? Did he seem genuinely interested in your perspective, or was he merely waiting for his turn to speak? The men who listen well are the ones who make a book club feel like an event worth attending. The people to avoid. Every group dynamic carries inherent hazards. Some are obvious, while others only reveal themselves over time. When selecting your founding members, there are several archetypes you should actively avoid. The monologist. This is the man who treats every discussion prompt as an invitation to deliver a prepared lecture. He is not engaging in a conversation, he is performing one. You can identify him early. He rarely asks follow-up questions. He consistently steers the topic back to his own experiences, and his contributions run significantly longer than anyone else's. In a book club setting, the monologist is the person who answers a simple question about the ending with a 12-minute tour of his personal philosophy. The rest of the group will eventually stop contributing because there is no oxygen left in the room. One monologist can hollow out a book club in 3 meetings. The politicizer. This is the man who possesses the unique ability to connect any book to his preferred political grievance within 90 seconds. You could be discussing a 19th century polar expedition, and somehow, by page 2 of the conversation, he is relitigating a recent election. He may be genuinely passionate and well-informed, but he is a poor fit for a book club. If every meeting devolves into a political debate, the men who hold differing views will quietly stop attending, leaving you with an echo chamber that reads books merely to confirm what they already believe. The networker. This is the man who views every social gathering as a professional networking opportunity. He is not there to discuss the reading material. He is there to distribute business cards, secure LinkedIn connections, and position himself advantageously. While this behavior is fine in his natural habitat, a book club is not his natural habitat. His presence alters the temperature of the room in ways that are hard to articulate but immediately felt by everyone else. The actually guy. This is the man who is physically incapable of letting an imprecise statement pass without issuing a correction. If someone says, "The author grew up in Chicago," he will interject, "Actually, he grew up in Evanston, which is technically a separate municipality." He is not factually wrong, but he is exhausting. The actually guy makes other men reluctant to contribute because nobody wants to be corrected in front of their peers. Over time, the quieter members will stop speaking up entirely, and the discussion will narrow to the 2 or 3 men confident enough to withstand the constant corrections. The ghost. This is the man who enthusiastically says yes to everything and reliably shows up to nothing. He commits to the first meeting, seems genuinely excited, and then vanishes. He will always have a legitimate reason: work travel, a family emergency, a scheduling conflict, but the net effect is the same. He is not there. The ghost is not malicious, he is simply overcommitted. The problem is that he occupies a mental slot on your roster without contributing to the group's culture. If you have 3 ghosts in a founding group of 7, you effectively have a group of 4, which is structurally fragile. A book club is delicate in its infancy. A single conversational rhinoceros can easily trample the seedlings. The ideal founding group. A robust founding group requires a blend of personalities. You do not need to conduct personality assessments or build a complex spreadsheet, but it is highly beneficial to consider the specific roles that make a group function effectively, and ensure your list of names covers most of them. The organizer is the engine of the club. He sends the calendar invites, confirms the dates, follows up when the group chat goes quiet, and holds the administrative thread. This is often the founder, but it does not have to be. What matters is that someone explicitly owns this role, because without it, the club will inevitably drift. The organizer does not need to be the most charismatic person in the room. He simply needs to be reliable and willing to do the unglamorous work of maintaining momentum. The reliable host is the person who possesses the right physical space and the willingness to use it. He has a living room, a backyard, or a garage where 6 to 8 men can sit comfortably. More importantly, he does not view hosting as a burden. He ensures the environment is welcoming and the food is ready. The value of a good host cannot be overstated. The physical space directly shapes the emotional space of the gathering. The funny guy is an essential component. This does not mean you need a stand-up comedian. You simply need a man with a genuine sense of humor who can diffuse tension, break an awkward silence, and prevent the room from taking itself too seriously. Book clubs have a natural tendency to drift towards self-importance. The funny guy serves as the natural corrective. When someone begins explaining the symbolic significance of a minor character's hat for the 3rd time, the funny guy is the one who makes a remark that resets the temperature of the room. The serious reader is the man who consistently finishes the books, considers them carefully, and brings genuine, well-thought-out observations to the table. He should not be a snob, but he should take the reading process seriously enough to elevate the conversation. Without at least one serious reader, the discussion can easily become shallow. He is the person who points out a structural contradiction in Chapter 9, suddenly engaging the entire group in a way they were not a moment before. The contrarian is the man who is willing to disagree with the consensus, not out of stubbornness, but because he genuinely views the material differently. He is the one who will argue that the villain actually had a valid point, or that a universally praised book is fundamentally flawed. The contrarian is highly valuable because he prevents the group from collapsing into easy, polite agreement. The best discussions occur when someone challenges the room's baseline assumptions. It is crucial, however, to distinguish between a contrarian and a lunatic. A contrarian constructs arguments, a lunatic creates scenes. The thoughtful, quiet guy is the man who speaks infrequently, but when he does, his words carry weight. He spends most of the meeting listening carefully and making connections that the louder members have missed. When he finally speaks, the room often goes still in a way it does not for the more vocal participants. You must protect this person. Give him the floor when he wants it, and do not allow the monologists to crowd him out. The wild card is the man who introduces unpredictability to the group. He brings an unexpected perspective, perhaps due to a different professional background, a unique set of life experiences, or simply a different way of processing information. He asks the questions nobody else thought to ask and connects the reading material to seemingly unrelated concepts in ways that somehow make perfect sense. The wild card prevents the group's thinking from calcifying. You do not need to fill every single one of these roles perfectly, but aiming for a blend is critical. If everyone is too serious, the club feels like a graduate seminar. If everyone is too casual, nobody will read the book. If everyone is too similar, the discussion will be flat. Your goal is to assemble a group where the differences between the men serve as assets rather than sources of friction. Where to find your founding members? The most common error founders make is thinking too narrowly about their network. They default to inviting the 5 men they see most frequently, usually neighbors, direct coworkers, or the fathers they stand next to at youth sports games. While these are acceptable starting points, relying solely on proximity tends to produce a group with highly similar perspectives and identical blind spots. You must cast a slightly wider net. Think about the men you deeply respect but do not see regularly enough. Consider the former colleague who always offered an interesting perspective on complex problems. Think about the acquaintance from your community group who reads widely and asks penetrating questions. Consider the friend from college you have been meaning to reconnect with for years. A book club provides an excellent, structured reason to reach out to someone you have drifted away from. The invitation itself functions as a form of friendship maintenance. Furthermore, prioritize diversity of experience, not just diversity of personality. A group comprising a physician, a general contractor, a high school teacher, a small business owner, and a retired military officer will generate a far richer discussion about almost any text than a group of 5 men who all work in the same industry and live in the same subdivision. Different professional backgrounds generate different analytical questions. Different life experiences produce entirely different readings of the exact same text. The invitation. When it is time to extend the invitations, do not over-explain. The longer and more detailed the invitation, the more it sounds like a heavy obligation you are asking someone to take on, rather than an enjoyable opportunity you are offering them. Use a simple, direct message. Thinking of starting a men's book club. Once a month, short, good books, food included, low pressure, but we'll actually discuss the book. Interested? That is entirely sufficient. If they say yes, you can provide the logistical details. If they say no, neither of you has invested significant time in a drawn-out negotiation. The tone of the invitation matters enormously. You must clearly signal that you are not asking him to join a solemn order of monks, nor are you asking him to commit to a rigorous, year-long academic curriculum. You are inviting him to a monthly ritual that might improve his life, and you are doing so without requiring him to buy linen pants or learn literary theory. Here are a few variations of the invitation, tailored to different relationships and club models. For a neighbor or casual friend, hey, I'm putting together a small book club for guys in the neighborhood. Once a month, rotating houses, food, short books, real conversation, no pressure if it's not your thing, but I thought you'd be a good fit. Interested? For a professional contact or colleague, I'm starting a small men's book club, mostly nonfiction, practical stuff, once a month. 6 to 8 guys. The kind of group where you actually talk about what you read and how to apply it. Thought of you. Want in? For an old friend you want to reconnect with. Been meaning to reach out. I'm starting a book club, once a month. Good books, food, the kind of conversation we used to have. Would love to have you involved if you're up for it. In every variation, the message remains short, specific enough to be credible, and warm enough to feel like a genuine invitation rather than a recruitment pitch. Managing the maybe response. Inevitably, some men will not give you a clear yes or no. They will respond with maybe, sounds interesting, or let me check my schedule, and then they will go quiet. This is entirely normal behavior. Do not chase them aggressively, but do not immediately write them off either. The correct approach is to send one single follow-up message once you have established a concrete date and location. First meeting is date at time at location. We're reading book. Come if you can. No commitment required beyond showing up. That is all you need to do. If they attend, excellent. If they do not, move forward without them. The men who are meant to be in your founding group will find a way to clear their schedules. Do not attempt to build your group's foundation on a foundation of maybes. Build it around the definitive yeses and let the maybes sort themselves out over the course of the first few months. The first rule, the founder chooses the first 3 books. For the first 3 months of the club's existence, the founder must choose the books. Democracy can come later. This rule is not about maintaining control, it is about establishing momentum. In the beginning, the members need confidence that the club will be worth their ongoing investment of time. They need to experience a genuinely good meeting before they will commit to the group's long-term future. If you open the floor to collective book selection before anyone has experienced a single meeting, you will spend your entire first gathering debating options rather than discussing a book. You will quickly discover that 6 men have 6 completely different, often incompatible, ideas about what a men's book club should read. Do not start your club with a committee debate over whether to read a dense 640-page biography, a niche parenting book, or the obscure novel one member has been recommending to people since 2009. Instead, pick 3 strong, highly accessible books. Keep them short. Make the first experience as easy to say yes to as possible. As a practical example, your opening sequence might look like this: a gripping survival narrative under 300 pages for month 1, a genuinely funny memoir for month 2, and a business story featuring complex moral conflict for month 3. These 3 books cover entirely different categories. They are all accessible to men who do not read habitually, and each one provides the group with something concrete and interesting to debate. By the time you have finished those 3 books, the group will have developed a culture, a rhythm, and enough shared experience to make intelligent, collective decisions about what to read next. The ultimate goal of the first meeting is to leave every man in the room thinking, "That was better than I expected." That specific sentiment is your launch fuel. Everything that follows, the second meeting, the third meeting, and the tradition that builds over years, starts with someone driving home after the first gathering and deciding that it was a valuable use of their time. Your primary job as the founder is to ensure that happens. Chapter 4. The meeting format that actually works. A book club requires a format in the same way a fire requires a ring of stones. Without a defined boundary, the energy spreads out, loses its heat, and eventually extinguishes itself. A structured format concentrates the conversation and ensures the evening serves its intended purpose. The 90-minute version. For most groups, 90 minutes is the ideal duration. It is long enough to allow for meaningful discussion, but short enough that busy men will not dread the time commitment. Here is the standard breakdown. 0 to 20. Arrival and food. When men arrive, let them talk. Do not attempt to begin the meeting the moment the second person walks through the door. Men require a runway to transition from the stress of their workday into a social mindset. Use this time to serve the food, get comfortable, and let the initial wave of small talk run its course. 0:20 to 30. One-sentence reviews. Once everyone is seated, initiate the formal part of the meeting by going around the room and asking each person for a one-sentence review of the book. They can state whether they loved it, hated it, didn't finish it, but have thoughts, or simply share their biggest complaint. This practice is crucial because it gets every man's voice into the room early, breaking the ice and establishing that everyone is expected to participate. 0:30 to 1:10. Main discussion. This is the core of the evening. The facilitator should guide the group through a small number of prepared questions. Do not bring a list of 20 questions. Bring 5. The goal is to spark conversation, not to conduct an interrogation. 1:10 to 1:20. Best passage or best idea. As the main discussion winds down, ask each person to share a specific line, scene, concept, or moment from the book that stuck with them. This allows the group to highlight the most impactful elements of the text and often triggers a final, brief wave of deep conversation. 1:20 to 1:30. Next book and logistics. Use the final 10 minutes to handle the administrative work. Confirm the selection for the next book, verify who is hosting, lock in the date, and decide on the food plan. Doing this while everyone is in the room prevents endless text message threads later in the month. After 1:30, optional social drift. Once the book has been properly honored and the logistics are settled, release the structure. Let the conversation wander naturally into sports, work challenges, conspiracy theories about lawn care pricing, or whatever else the room produces. The men who need to leave can do so without guilt, and those who want to stay and talk have the space to do so. The 2-hour version. If your group enjoys a more relaxed pace, particularly around the food, you can easily expand the format to 2 hours. Allocate 30 minutes for food and unstructured social time, 75 minutes for the core book discussion, 15 minutes for logistics and selecting the next book, and leave the remaining time for optional hangout. Regardless of whether you choose the 90-minute or 2-hour version, the underlying principle remains the same. The book must come first, before the group dissolves into general, unstructured chatter. The 5 fixed questions. Many facilitators struggle because they attempt to use overly complex or academic discussion questions. Fancy questions often die in the air, met only by blank stares. Simple questions, however, keep breathing. They give the group room to maneuver. You can use these 5 fixed questions for almost any book, whether it is fiction, narrative nonfiction, memoir, history, or business. What specific idea or scene stuck with you the most? What did you find yourself disagreeing with or resisting? Who or what changed over the course of this book? Where does the central theme of this book connect to your real life? Would you recommend this book, and specifically, to whom? These questions are effective because they do not require the reader to have a perfect memory of the plot. They require the reader to have an opinion, which is much easier to produce and much more interesting to discuss. The "I didn't finish" rule. It is a statistical certainty that, in any given month, someone will not finish the book. When this happens, do not shame the non-finishers. A man who did not finish the reading but still makes the effort to show up is infinitely more valuable to the club than a man who finished the book but decided to stay home. To handle this gracefully, establish a clear rule. You are always welcome to attend if you did not finish the book, but you cannot dominate the conversation if you did not do the reading. This is a fair and easily understood boundary. Non-finishers are encouraged to ask questions, react to the points others make, and listen actively. However, they should not attempt to deliver a 14-minute theory on the author's intent based solely on having read Chapter 1 and the Amazon summary. The role of the facilitator. To prevent burnout, the role of the facilitator should rotate each month. The facilitator's job is not to lecture the group or to act as the resident professor. His job is to manage the flow of the room. A good facilitator does 3 specific things. He initiates the discussion, he keeps the conversation moving when it stalls or gets bogged down in minutia, and he actively ensures that the quieter members are given opportunities to speak. Effective facilitators rely on a few standard phrases to manage the room. When a few people are dominating, he might say, "Let's hear from someone who hasn't jumped in yet." When the conversation drifts too far off topic, he might say, "Before we chase that rabbit entirely into the woods, let's connect it back to what the author was arguing." When a good point is made, he might say, "What did the rest of you think about that?" The facilitator is essentially a traffic cop at a strange but highly useful intersection. His presence ensures that everyone gets to their destination without a collision. Chapter 5: How to Pick Books Men Actually Discuss. When selecting material for a men's book club, the most common error is choosing a book simply because it is deemed important. A book may be historically significant, critically acclaimed, or a staple of academic syllabi, but those qualities do not inherently make it a good selection for a monthly gathering. You should not pick books to impress anyone. You should pick books because they reliably generate conversation. A truly effective book club selection typically possesses at least 3 of the following characteristics: a compelling narrative drive, genuine moral conflict, characters who make highly debatable choices, clear practical applications, significant emotional stakes, an element of strangeness, or an exploration of a world most members know nothing about. It must raise a question that reasonable people can disagree upon, or contain a scene that is difficult to forget. Crucially, the goal is not universal approval. A book that everyone in the room politely likes is often worse for discussion than a book that half the group actively despises. Polite approval leads to short, agreeable conversations that quickly fizzle out. Strong opinions, even negative ones, fuel the engine of debate. The 350-page rule momentum is the lifeblood of a new habit, and completing a book provides a distinct psychological reward. Therefore, especially during the first year of your club's existence, you should adhere strictly to the 350-page rule. Keep the vast majority of your selections under this limit. A sprawling, 700-page biography might be a masterpiece, but in the context of a new book club, it functions as an attendance tax. When men look at a massive tome on their nightstand, it feels like an insurmountable obligation rather than an enjoyable challenge. Short books, by contrast, facilitate completion. Completion generates confidence within the individual reader. That confidence, multiplied across the group, creates a durable culture. You can tackle longer, more demanding books later, once the habit of the club is firmly established. The importance of rotating categories. If your group reads the exact same genre every month, the meetings will inevitably become predictable. A steady diet of business books will eventually turn the club into a networking seminar. A relentless focus on heavy, tragic history will make the gatherings feel oppressive. To maintain intellectual vitality, you must rotate your categories. A healthy rotation might move from a survival narrative one month to a biography the next, followed by a book on behavioral psychology, a piece of classic fiction, a true crime investigation, and finally a completely unpredictable wild card selection. This deliberate variation provides novelty without descending into chaos. It ensures that different members of the group get to operate in their preferred intellectual territory throughout the year. The book-picking scorecard. To formalize the selection process and avoid choosing duds, you can evaluate potential books using a simple scorecard. Before committing to a title, rate it from 1 to 5 on the following criteria. Is the prose highly readable and engaging? Is the core subject matter genuinely discussable? Is the length manageable, ideally under 350 pages? Will at least half the group care about the topic? Does the text raise questions that apply to real life? Does the narrative contain tension, conflict, or surprise? And finally, will the members remember the core ideas a month after reading it? A book that scores 25 or higher on this scale is almost certainly a strong selection. A book that scores under 18 might still be a fantastic piece of literature, but it is likely the wrong tool for the specific job of fueling your group's discussion. Books to approach with caution. While variety is important, certain types of books carry a high risk of derailing a new group. In your first year, you should actively avoid dense philosophical treatises, exhaustive doorstop biographies, highly technical manuals, and partisan political books. You should also avoid books that are impossible to summarize succinctly, books chosen primarily to signal intellectual superiority, and books that one specific member is weirdly obsessed with and will defend against any criticism like a castle wall. The first year of your club is about building trust and establishing the habit of gathering. You can explore stranger, more demanding territory later. Chapter 6. The first 12 months. Building momentum requires more than good intentions. It requires a roadmap. If you approach each month as an isolated event, the selection process becomes exhausting. If you plan a thematic arc, the year begins to feel like a cohesive journey. Here are 4 sample tracks designed to guide a group through its first 12 months. Track A, the accessible year. This track is designed for groups where the majority of members do not currently possess a strong reading habit. The goal is to make completion easy and the discussions immediately engaging. The year should feel like a tasting menu, not a prison sentence. You might begin with a short, high-stakes survival story in month 1, followed by a genuinely funny memoir in month 2. Month 3 could examine a well-known business scandal or fraud, providing clear moral questions. Month 4 introduces a short novel with a propulsive plot, while month 5 pivots to a practical book on health or daily habits. The second half of the year could explore true crime, a narrative of moral courage during wartime, popular science, a memoir centered on fatherhood, a classic novella, a book examining our relationship with money, and conclude with a wild-card selection chosen by the group. Track B, the Nonfiction Field Manual. This track is built for men who view reading primarily as a tool for self-improvement and practical application. The sequence begins with a survival narrative to establish high stakes, then moves immediately into actionable territory with a book on longevity and physical health. Month 3 tackles personal finance, followed by a business biography in month 4. To prevent the discussions from becoming purely transactional, month 5 introduces a compelling work of history, and month 6 explores behavioral psychology. The remainder of the year covers philosophy or faith, leadership principles, the impact of technology, an analysis of institutional failure, a reflective memoir, and finishes with the group voting on the most practical book published that year. Track C, the Better Conversations Year. This track is curated specifically to open side doors into deeper, more personal discussions. It is not designed to be group therapy. but it intentionally creates openings for men to discuss the realities of adult life. The thematic journey begins by examining the nature of friendship in month 1, followed by books that explore work and ambition, marriage and commitment, and the complexities of fatherhood. The middle of the year tackles heavier themes: moral courage, the anatomy of failure, the reality of aging, and the psychology of money. The final months guide the group through discussions on faith and doubt, the burden of regret, the value of service, and finally, a book that prompts reflection on death and legacy. Track D, the 50-plus Men's Club. The right books help men articulate the specific challenges and opportunities of the stage of life they are actually in. This track is designed for men in the later stages of their careers or entering retirement. It opens with a memoir focused on aging or late-life reinvention. Month 2 examines a significant historical event that occurred during the members' lifetimes, providing a shared point of reference. The track then moves through books on longevity, complex family dynamics, the transition into retirement, and reflections on military or public service. To balance the gravity of these topics, Month 7 introduces a purely humorous selection. The year concludes with explorations of spiritual reflection, adventure, biographies of individuals who achieved greatness late in life, the maintenance of long-term friendships, and the concept of legacy. Chapter 7: Food, Location, and the Ritual Layer. In the architecture of a successful book club, the book serves as the brain, but the food serves as the glue. You must not underestimate the psychological impact of food. The presence of a shared meal fundamentally alters the emotional weather of a room. A group of men gathered around a table with burgers, pizza, chili, or tacos feels entirely different from a group of men sitting in a circle of chairs under the pale, fluorescent light of obligation. Food signals that the gathering is a social event, not a seminar. The value of rotating locations. Whenever practical, the responsibility of hosting should rotate among the members. Rotating homes distributes the logistical effort and prevents any single member from feeling burdened. More importantly, it gives the group texture. Seeing how another man lives, sitting in his living room, standing in his kitchen, subtly deepens the connection between the members. If rotating homes is not feasible due to space constraints or family dynamics, you must choose a consistent, neutral location. This could be a reserved room at the local library, a quiet corner of a brewery, an office conference room after hours, or a park pavilion during the warmer months. The best location is rarely the most aesthetically pleasing one. The best location is the one that is the easiest to secure and repeat month after month. Keep the menu simple. When men host, they sometimes feel the urge to impress the group with elaborate culinary efforts. You must actively discourage this. Do not let hosting become a performance. When the food becomes complicated, the barrier to hosting rises. If a member feels he must prepare a 3-course meal, he will eventually find reasons to avoid hosting, and the club's momentum will suffer. Keep the options simple and reliable. Order pizzas, grill burgers, make a large pot of chili, or set up a basic taco bar. Alternatively, you can utilize a model where the host provides the main dish and everyone else is responsible for bringing a side or a beverage. A club begins to die the moment hosting feels like preparing for a wedding rehearsal dinner. The goal is simply to make people glad they came. The power of small rituals. Rituals are the mechanisms by which a casual gathering transforms into a meaningful tradition. They provide a sense of continuity and belonging. You do not need to invent complex ceremonies, but introducing 1 or 2 small rituals will make the club feel tangible. This could be as simple as opening every meeting with the exact same check-in question. It could involve purchasing one physical hardcover copy of the book that the group passes to the member responsible for choosing the next month's selection. You might institute an annual vote for the best book and worst book of the year, or hold one meeting a year outdoors around a fire. The key is restraint. Men possess a highly tuned radar for forced whimsy. They can detect manufactured sentimentality the way a dog detects a thunderstorm. Do not overdo it. 1 or 2 simple, consistent rituals are entirely sufficient to bind the group together. Chapter 8: What to do when nobody read the book. If your book club survives long enough, you will eventually encounter a month where almost no one has finished the reading. This is a statistical inevitability. When it happens, you must not panic, and you must not view it as a failure of the group. A meeting where nobody finished the book does not mean the club is dead. It simply means the club is having a very human month. When faced with this scenario, you must abandon the standard discussion format and pivot immediately to the emergency protocol. The emergency protocol. The first step is to conduct a quick, honest inventory of the room. Ask each member exactly how much of the book they managed to read. Do not allow anyone to give a defensive speech or offer elaborate excuses. Simply collect the data. Next, ask the members who did read the furthest to provide a concise summary of the core premise or the narrative arc up to that point. Once the basic facts are on the table, the facilitator must identify a single, broad theme that the book points toward. If the unread book was a biography of a CEO, the theme is ambition. If it was a survival story, the theme is fear or resilience. If it was a book on habit formation, the theme is discipline. For the remainder of the evening, you do not discuss the book itself. You discuss the theme. You ask the men how ambition, fear, or discipline is currently operating in their own lives. A conversation about a shared human experience is always more valuable than a forced conversation about a book nobody read. Finally, at the end of the night, you must make a definitive choice. Either abandon the book entirely and pick a new one for next month, or agree to give it one more try. Do not automatically punish the group by extending a terrible book for another 30 days out of a misplaced sense of duty. The 50-page rule. To prevent members from skipping the meeting entirely when they fall behind on the reading, you should establish the 50-page rule. The rule is simple. If you are struggling to get through the book, or if your month has been unusually chaotic, you are asked to read just the first 50 pages and attend the meeting anyway. This lowers the barrier to entry and keeps the door open. Often, 50 pages is enough to grasp the author's tone and the central conflict, allowing the member to participate in the broader discussion. Even if the book never catches fire for them, they can still show up and contribute honestly. Extracting value from the did not read experience. A member who failed to finish the book can still provide valuable data to the group. The facilitator should ask the non-readers a series of diagnostic questions. Why did the book fail to hold your attention? Was the core topic uninteresting, or was the author's writing style the problem? What specific elements would have made the book easier to consume? Based on the summary provided by the others, do you have any desire to go back and finish it? And most importantly, what lessons should the group learn from this failure when selecting books in the future? That final question is the most critical. A bad book choice is only a wasted month if you fail to learn from it. In the context of building a durable habit, failure is simply data wearing a disguise. Chapter 9. How to keep the group from getting stale. Every long-term endeavor eventually encounters a plateau, and a book club is no exception. Sometime during your second or third year, you will likely hit a dull patch. Attendance may dip slightly. You may notice that the same 2 or 3 men are dominating every conversation. The book selections may begin to feel repetitive. One month might devolve into a debate about current events, while the next becomes a venting session about work frustrations, leaving the actual book sitting on the table untouched. This is a normal phase in the life cycle of any group. It does not indicate that the club is failing. It simply indicates that the system requires a reset. When the energy wanes, you can deploy several specific strategies to revive it. Reset 1. Execute a hard category pivot. The most common cause of a stale book club is intellectual monotony. If your group has spent 6 months reading dense, practical nonfiction, the members are likely fatigued by the constant demand for self-improvement. The solution is to pick a short, gripping novel. Conversely, if you have spent the year reading literary fiction, the group may be craving something grounded in reality. The solution is to select a fast-paced true crime narrative or a biography. If the recent selections have been emotionally heavy, pivot to something genuinely funny. If the books have been highly practical, pivot to something strange and abstract. A sharp change in category forces the brain to engage differently and reliably revives the group's attention. Reset 2. Alter the meeting format. If the standard discussion questions are no longer generating heat, you must alter the structure of the evening itself. A one-night format change introduces novelty while maintaining the necessary boundaries. You might dedicate an entire evening to a favorite passages format, where the only requirement is that each man brings 2 paragraphs he highlighted and explains why they mattered to him. You could host a debate night, assigning specific members to argue opposing sides of the book's central conflict. You might ask the group to rank the characters by their moral integrity, or spend the evening discussing what specific questions they would ask the author if he were in the room. The specific format matters less than the fact that it is different from the usual routine. Novelty sparks engagement, but the structure ensures the evening does not devolve into chaos. Reset 3. Introduce an outside voice. When the same 6 men talk to each other every month for 2 years, they learn each other's intellectual rhythms and blind spots. The chemistry becomes predictable. The fastest way to alter that chemistry is to invite a single guest. The guest should ideally have some connection to the material. If you are reading a book about military history, invite a veteran. If you are reading about a medical breakthrough, invite a physician. You might invite a local author, a professor, an entrepreneur, or simply a friend of a member who happens to be deeply passionate about the specific topic. The presence of a new individual forces the established members to articulate their thoughts more clearly and often brings out a different side of their personalities. This strategy should be used sparingly, perhaps once or twice a year, so that the club remains the primary domain of its core members. Reset 4. The annual reflection. Scattered monthly meetings can easily blur together in the memory. To give the club a sense of history and progression, you should utilize the final meeting of the year for an annual vote and reflection. Ask the members to vote on specific categories: the best book of the year, the worst book of the year, and the book that surprised them the most. Ask them to identify which meeting produced the best discussion, which book they still find themselves arguing about internally, and which book they would confidently recommend to their own sons or brothers. Finally, ask them to vote on the book that should be made illegal to ever choose again. This process of annual reflection is powerful. It takes 12 isolated events and weaves them into a cohesive narrative, reminding the men why they committed to the habit in the first place. Chapter 10. The Book List. There is a persistent misconception that a men's book club must exclusively read what are traditionally considered men's books. In popular culture, this phrase usually conjures images of military history, treatises on stoicism, manuals on grilling meat, or novels featuring a solitary man staring at a lighthouse while drinking whiskey. While those books certainly have their place, relying on them exclusively is a mistake. The most robust and enduring men's book clubs maintain a much wider shelf. To build a varied and engaging reading list, you should draw from the following core categories, each of which serves a specific conversational purpose. Adventure and survival. Survival narratives are highly effective because they generate instant, visceral discussion. They bypass abstract theory and force the reader to confront a single, unavoidable question: what would you have done? These books explore the extreme limits of human endurance, the mechanics of fear, the consequences of poor decision-making, and the raw realities of nature. They provide a safe environment to debate leadership under pressure. When discussing these books, you can ask the group to identify the moment the disaster became inevitable. You can ask who made the most crucial error, who demonstrated the most competence, and where the line between profound courage and sheer stupidity actually lies. Business, money, and ambition books focused on business and finance are reliable selections because most men possess strong, pre-existing opinions about work, success, and the mechanics of the economy. These narratives, whether they are biographies of visionary founders or autopsies of massive corporate frauds, allow the group to examine the nature of ambition. They raise questions about the role of ego, the power of financial incentives, and the moral compromises often required to achieve outsized success. The most productive discussions arise when you ask the group to evaluate the protagonist. Was this individual genuinely admirable, incredibly lucky, fundamentally dishonest, or some complex combination of all three. More importantly, you can ask the men to identify where they see similar incentive structures operating in their own professional lives. Health, mortality, and discipline books concerning physical health, longevity, and habit formation often lead to surprisingly intimate conversations. While men may be reluctant to discuss their emotions directly, they are often quite willing to discuss the mechanics of their daily routines. These books address the universal realities of aging, the struggle for discipline, the management of pain, and the inevitability of death. They force the reader to confront the gap between what they know they should do and what they actually do. During the discussion, you can ask the group what specific advice from the book they found most compelling and what advice seemed entirely unrealistic for a normal person. You can ask what facts they already knew but have been actively ignoring and what specific changes they are actually willing to make. War, conflict, and moral courage. Books centered on warfare and institutional conflict require careful handling, but they consistently produce some of the most profound discussions a group will ever have. These narratives explore the heavy themes of duty, brotherhood, trauma, sacrifice, and moral injury. They strip away the complexities of civilian life and present human behavior in its most distilled form. When guiding a discussion on these topics, the goal is not to debate the geopolitical justification for the conflict, but to examine the individuals involved. You can ask the group to identify who acted with true honor when the systems around them failed. You can ask what specific circumstances might have broken their own resolve and how the book complicates their understanding of what courage actually looks like in practice. Fathers, sons, family, and identity books that explore family dynamics, whether through memoir or fiction, serve as powerful side doors into discussions about real life. These narratives touch on the weight of inheritance, the burden of expectations, the complexities of modern masculinity, the realities of marriage, and the difficult work of forgiveness. They allow men to discuss the challenges of parenting or the shadows cast by their own fathers without feeling as though they are participating in a therapy session. The most effective questions focus on the unsaid elements of the story. You can ask what the characters were actively avoiding saying to one another, which relationship felt the most authentic, and what specific traits or burdens are passed down through generations without ever being explicitly acknowledged. The weird, the funny, and the uncategorizable. Every healthy reading list requires the occasional oddball selection. A steady diet of heavy, serious books will eventually exhaust the group. These selections might explore absurd subcultures, strange professions, historical oddities, or simply the bizarre nature of human behavior. They provide a necessary release of tension and remind the group that reading is also supposed to be enjoyable. When discussing these books, the questions should be light and exploratory. You can ask the group to identify the strangest detail the author uncovered, why human beings are so prone to obsession, or which specific character they would most want to invite to dinner. Chapter 11. Troubleshooting the usual problems. Even the most carefully constructed book club will eventually encounter friction. Human dynamics are inherently messy, and when a group of men meets regularly over a period of years, certain predictable problems will arise. The key to longevity is not avoiding these problems, but knowing exactly how to troubleshoot them when they appear. Problem. A single member consistently dominates the conversation. When one person consumes all the oxygen in the room, the quieter members will eventually stop attending. You cannot fix this by dropping subtle hints. You must use the structure of the meeting to solve it. As the facilitator, you must actively direct traffic. You can say, "Let's pause there and go around the circle to hear from everyone." Or, more directly, "I want to hold that thought because I want to make sure we get a few other voices in on this topic." If the behavior persists, you must address it privately outside the meeting. Frame it as a request for assistance rather than a reprimand. "Your insights are always great, but I'm trying to make sure the quieter guys have room to speak. Can you help me draw them out next time?" This approach makes him an ally in solving the problem rather than casting him as the villain. Problem. The group repeatedly drifts into political arguments. If a book club becomes a proxy for the evening news, it will fracture. You must establish a firm boundary. Political discussion is permitted only when it arises directly from the text of the book being discussed. This rule does not eliminate politics entirely, which is impossible, but it places politics on a leash. It forces the group to analyze the author's argument rather than reciting their own pre-existing grievances. Problem: nobody wants to take responsibility for picking the next book. When the burden of selection falls repeatedly on the founder, he becomes the unpaid librarian for everyone else's intellectual life, which quickly leads to resentment. The solution is a strict rotation. Every member is assigned a specific month. When it is their turn, they must bring 3 viable options to the meeting, and the group votes on the winner. This system distributes the labor and ensures that the reading list reflects the varied interests of the entire group. Problem: attendance becomes highly inconsistent. Inconsistent attendance is almost always a scheduling failure. If you attempt to use a digital poll to find a new date every single month, the club will die. Digital polls are where adult plans go to be pecked apart by crows. You must fix the calendar. Establish a rigid recurring time, for example, the second Thursday of every month at 8 p.m., and never change it. The men who prioritize the club will build their schedules around that fixed point. Problem: the group unanimously agrees that the book was terrible. This is not actually a problem, it is an opportunity. A terrible book can generate a fantastic discussion if you approach it analytically. Ask the group why the book failed so spectacularly. Ask them to identify the intended audience, what specific elements they were hoping for instead, and what lessons the group should take away to avoid making a similar mistake in the future. A bad book only becomes a disaster if the group refuses to discuss why it was bad. Problem: the conversations feel consistently shallow. If the group is merely summarizing the plot and avoiding deeper themes, the facilitator must introduce a bridging question. The most effective tool for this is simply asking, what did this book make you think about regarding your own life? You do not need to force everyone to provide a profound, soul-bearing answer. You simply place the question on the table, let it sit there, and allow the men to engage with it at whatever depth they choose. Problem: the club feels emotionally heavy and exhausting. If the discussions have become overly serious, the solution is immediate and practical. Pick something genuinely funny for the next month. Depth is important, but depth requires oxygen. A well-timed comedy or an absurd narrative will reset the emotional baseline of the group. Chapter 12: How to Start This Month. The greatest threat to a new book club is overplanning. If you wait until you have curated the perfect reading list, assembled the flawless roster of members, and perfected your hosting capabilities, you will never hold the first meeting. The goal is not perfection. The goal is momentum. Here is a simple 4-week launch plan designed to move you from the idea phase to the first actual meeting. Week 1. Choose the model and send the invitations. Your first task is to define the purpose of the group. Decide whether you are building a burger and book club, a nonfiction field manual club, or a story-first club. Write a single sentence that clearly articulates this purpose. Next, identify 5 to 8 men who are reliable and curious. Send them a brief, low-pressure invitation. The message should be direct. I'm starting a small men's book club. Once a month, good food, short books, real discussion, low pressure. The first meeting is date. Are you interested? Week 2. Select the first book and lock the calendar. As the founder, you must select the first book yourself. Do not ask the group for input at this stage. Choose a book that is highly readable, universally engaging, and strictly under 300 pages. Simultaneously, establish the recurring schedule. Decide on the specific day and time, such as the first Tuesday of the month at 7:30 p.m., and communicate this clearly to the group. Once this time is set, you must protect it fiercely. Treat it as an immovable commitment. Week 3. Distribute the first meeting details. 1 week before the gathering, send a concise logistical update to the group. This message should include the book title, the date, the time, the location, and the plan for food. Crucially, you must also set the expectation for the reading. Include a sentence that lowers the barrier to entry, such as, "Come, even if you don't manage to finish the whole book. Just read enough to have one specific thing you want to talk about. This ensures that men who fell behind will still attend. Week 4. Host the meeting. When the evening arrives, follow the structured format. Allow 20 minutes for food and casual conversation to help the men transition into the space. Begin the formal discussion with one-sentence reactions from every member, then move into the core discussion questions. Conclude the evening by confirming the date and the host for the next month. The morning after the first meeting, send a brief follow-up message to the group. Thank them for their time, announce the book for the second meeting, and reiterate the date. Momentum is constructed through a series of small, reliable confirmations. The idea of the club is introduced at the first meeting, but the reality of the club is cemented when the second meeting actually happens. Conclusion. Build the room. A men's book club is not a complex piece of machinery. At its core, it consists of 4 simple elements: a physical room, a chosen book, a designated date, and a small group of men who are willing to keep showing up. That is entirely sufficient. You do not need to wait until you have compiled the ultimate reading list. You do not need to wait until you have assembled a roster of men with flawless literary pedigrees. You do not need to wait until you have mastered the art of facilitating complex group dynamics, or until you have acquired a leather-bound edition of a Russian masterpiece that is emotionally hazardous to read. The perfect conditions will never arrive. The men you invite are currently busy, their schedules are crowded, and their attention is fractured. That is precisely why the club is necessary. The structure of the gathering is the antidote to the drift of modern adult life. The books you choose will provide the spark, and the food you serve will lower the temperature. But the true value of the endeavor lies in the recurring commitment to the group itself. When you start a book club, you are not merely organizing a reading schedule, you are building a room where real conversation can happen. You are creating a space where men can step outside their professional identities, set aside their daily obligations, and engage with ideas and with each other. Pick a date, choose a short book, send the text messages, build the room, and the men will fill it.